All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to Star Trek from the Holodeck. I am Michael, your host and captain of the USS Rainman Digital. And on the bridge is Ensign David. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
David, we are here a little late. A little later than I would like during our Star Trek coverage. However, this isn't like the old days of television when a holiday would occur and TV shows would not air. Which I always appreciated that because I don't like to miss shows. Now, there are no breaks.
No.
And unfortunately, we have fallen behind because of Thanksgiving. And now, of course, Christmas is coming up. It's very busy. Do you remember those television days where we had actual seasons?
Oh,
television
heck yeah.
seasons.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. When basically, we didn't have streaming service and media was 24/7 as it is now.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me that basically when you think about how all the shows nowadays are nonstop.
Yeah. And I maybe it's because in years past, we didn't have the DVR systems, so they would have to halt because then people en masse would miss the episodes and have no way of catching up.
Time makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, I wish we can go back to a low-tech society. Low-tech society was so much easier, Dave.
Yeah. I mean, especially with this episode, when you return back to a more lower-tech society, there's a little easier things to actually deal with.
Yeah. We're a pre-warp society, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're a pre-warp society.
Can we be a pre-warp society, please? That's what I'd like. I want to go back to ancient times where we can just beat people over the head, throw them off a cliff. And when you're looking to date, all you do is say, ooh, ooh. And then you throw the young lady over your shoulder and take her to the cave with you.
Jerry Ryan might enjoy that.
No, I don't. Have you ever met Jerry Ryan? Because I don't think that's true. All right, so let's get into today's episode of Lower Decks, episode 7 of its final season, titled Fully Dilated. Season 5, episode 7 of Star Trek Lower Decks delivers a vibrant mix of humor, nostalgia, and character growth that exemplifies the series, I guess you can say, at its best. This is what we typically like from our Lower Decks. Give us that silliness, but also give us something of value when it comes to story and character growth. The episode embarks on the quintessential Star Trek adventure, a recovery mission to a pre-warp planet, complicated by time dilation phenomenon.
Again, a time dilation, Mike. It's everywhere in Star Trek.
David, though, I like that this was a bit of a riff on the Star Trek Voyager episode.
Yeah.
And I always like that episode. I love those time dilation episodes, specifically the Voyager episode they referenced in this particular Lower Decks episode, because the idea of passing time and how you had the Voyager become essentially these deities locked in space. And an entire culture didn't realize that it was only a few minutes that Voyager was just up there orbiting their planet, but to them, it was a millennia.
Yep.
That's really cool, and that's pretty much where this episode takes its narrative cues and runs away with it. But in the end, David, did it do anything, though, for Mariner? Because Mariner, it was funny, but did Mariner actually learn anything from this time dilation? She desperately wanted to. She wanted to learn the flute. She was hoping to become a better person.
That was an amazing thing. Out of T'Lyn, Tendi, and Mariner, Tendi and T'Lyn are the ones that have the character growth. I think it's kind of like they're doing this juggling act this season where they're trying to actually make sure to give enough character growth to all of their cast, where it's kind of like, okay, we focused on Tendi in the very beginning and have her story wrap up. Now and the one character that they haven't really touched on a lot was T'Lyn, which
we actually said that earlier this season.
And I was like, man, they're kind of forgetting one of the Lower Decks crew. But then sure enough, they have an episode where, no, here's T'Lyn, and then this is what we're going to be focusing on with her, which is actually interesting with her story because there's talk of her becoming the senior science officer, I think, or like a position up there.
Mm-hmm.
and how that crosses over to Tendi, where it once again taps into one of those character insecurities of Tendi, where she may have gotten past her big character growth, but she still has those character flaws.
Yeah.
And I like that. They show that basically Tendi is still Tendi after everything. But like, yeah, this one with Mariner, it's like, it was kind of hilarious because I was like kind of squeaky on it because I was like going, oh, wait, nothing really happened with Mariner. And then when you get to the end with Talin making the comment that, oh, that's not how you play the flute.
Yeah.
I'm like going, oh, I think the joke is like, just like what you said, Mariner tries, but it doesn't work. Trying to force your growth doesn't really happen that way.
Well, that's rape. When you try to force your growth, that's rape, Dave. That's kind of what you were implying when you were saying, you know, bringing Jerry Ryan into the cave.
No. It's consensual. It's consensual.
We also had the very funny cameo with Brent Spiner's Data or Purple Data from an alternate reality. That was fun because that was also a throwback to the episode where that was the Mark Twain episode.
That was the Mark
right?
Twain episode
with Whoopi Goldberg's character Guinan. It was in the past. Yeah, that was a really intriguing and very unsettling episode at times, especially with how they the alien entities that they encountered that sent them back. I believe I don't remember the entire plot around that episode, but you and I have discussed it time and time again, and we have actually gone into detail with how it has a little bit of a cosmic horror vibe to it.
Oh yeah, because like there's a sense that basically in the very end you get this unsettling feeling that the crew of the Enterprise have no control.
Yeah.
This has to happen. You know, you have to have these moments happen. Yeah, they'll you know, move on after this episode and move on to other storylines, but in this particular episode, there is nothing they can do because there's no control. It's very similar, like later on in Voyager, the writing team on Voyager seemed to tackle that idea that there, in the grand scheme of things, you don't have control of like the bigger aspects around you. And that's why like you have stories like this in Voyager where you have the Voyager up there for a couple minutes, but to the planets like millennia. They don't have control. There's like it's an idea of like you have no control over your own destiny.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are always unsettling episodes for people, especially existential people, because we like to feel like we're in control of our lives. We already feel a little off-put because of the lack of meaning in a cosmological sense. So when you throw in this idea of determinism or the notion that we're not in complete control of our lives, maybe a soft deterministic outlook, it throws most people into a bit of an existential or nihilistic funk. And that's why episodes like that, like the one you're talking about, is so impactful, especially when you look at it from the lens of the Roddenberry humanist or secular humanist philosophy.
Oh, yeah, especially like even in an episode like this of Lower Decks, if you think about it, you look at the three characters that the story truly focuses on with Talin, Tendi, and Mariner. The one person who actually has control in quote unquote in her own destiny is Talin. And the other two are so chaotic, they're driven crazy.
Yeah, well, even I would even say, because this is a comedy, you have to be a little more light, not so
not so
doom and gloom.
Doom and gloom.
But even if you look at really, if you fully dissect Mariner's story in this episode, it is existential.
Yeah.
The fact that she is desperately looking for meaning and purpose while she's on this planet.
Yeah.
Because she wants to leave behind something. She wants to learn something. So even when you have episodes of Lower Decks that at a surface level is very silly and just filled with just self-referential aspects, very postmodernistic, but hey, you keep scraping and you realize there is a lot of value there as well in terms of the classic Star Trek narratives.
There is, because like when you look at like what Lower Decks did in this episode, they kind of scraped at the surface of that existential dread, but they timed it well with a lot of the humor that they're used to. You know, like Boimler and Rutherford being idiots and pouring the juice on the console and everything was a sign of dread. But the way they reacted to it, you know, like adds, because of the humor, it kind of adds to it. It's like watching them like wipe everything and start licking the console.
I have to say, though, that did annoy me a little bit, only because this is canon. Now, I want you to imagine that was live action.
Oh, it would
And
be
you saw-
so stupid.
You saw two regular people licking a console repeatedly for 45 minutes.
We're thinking about it though, Mike, and we're kind of chuckling at it.
Imagine if we saw Picard and Riker licking a console. It's fucking stupid.
But here's the thing: if you choose the right characters to do it, that's the beautiful thing about Lower Decks.
David,
they choose the right characters to do it, because think about it, if we had to, what if it was like Ensign Kim? That would be perfect. Ensign Kim, or even if it was Will and Geordi, that would make comedy gold.
I don't. Yes, it would be funny.
Barkley,
but we wouldn't see it. There's a reason why we've never seen that, because it's slapstick.
Yeah, it's slapstick,
a little
comedy.
too slapstick. But that's my. I don't want to get too off topic here, Dave, but that's my biggest problem with Lower Decks. I've said this since the show started. It's not a deal breaker for me. I get what this show is, but that's always been that little bit of annoyance for me, is the fact that this is canon, and when they do ridiculous things, I can't help but get this vision in my mind. Well, what if this was live action? And I see live action characters do this. I'm like, that's fucking stupid.
That's fucking stupid.
All right, so the Cerritos has encountered also during this episode another dimensional incursion. This is something we talked about, I believe, during our last discussion, that there isn't much of a myth arc this season. We had thought it was the dimensional rift, but here we are again. So possibly this is a loose myth arc of sorts, because it is deeply connected to this story in itself. This is how we were able to have the purple Data as well as the purple Enterprise. Correct me if I'm wrong. Data was purple as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, everyone's purple.
Everyone's purple in that dimension.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that was interesting, is like they made it sound like the Cerritos crew was dealing with not just that particular fissure, but multiple.
Multiple, yeah.
And it was like, okay, so there's another clue that something bigger is going on with the fissure, with these fissures. And if you think about it, it taps into, I'm thinking, as strange as it sounds, that the fissures kind of might bring in a story element that we kind of touched on about in the beginning of the show, of how like episodes that deal with larger beings that have more control than you.
Yeah.
And the fissures seem to be leading to like kind of a reveal of I guess you could say, an end boss of some sort that is all encompassing and more powerful than the Cerritos crew. And it's out of it's not in their control. They're going to run into this, whatever it is, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. You're right, David. I lost my train of thought. It was something about Data.
Oh, about the purple Data?
Oh, yeah. So I will say that this is how you do a cameo or a guest spot. Sometimes Lower Decks makes the horrible sin, in my opinion, of just bringing in guest spots just for fun. And I understand the premise of the show or the concept of the show. That's pretty much what it is. But if you can do multiple things at once, then you should. Because yes, we had a great opportunity to bring Brent Spiner back in and play Data, or a purple version of Data. But it wasn't just simply a cameo for shits and giggles, for fan service. Hey guys, put your hands together for Brent Spiner. There was a purpose behind this cameo. Not only was it connected to the myth arc of the dimensional rifts, but it also was a component of the story that aided in the character development of Tendi.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the absolute strength of this episode. And it might be the best part of the entire season to date so far for the 5th and final season, because we had a very true to Star Trek interpersonal relationship between the two. They knew each other for over a year. They worked together. Data's tutelage empowered Tendi. It matured her. And then in the end, it mattered. It wasn't just fun for fun's sake. At the end, it mattered to Tendi as a character, Data being involved. And also, it had repercussions on the plot itself, because Data also gave the input to Captain Freeman, or the advice that she should promote two people, both T'Lyn and Tendi, because together they're unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great way to justify having a guest spot.
Yes, because it makes it almost kind of makes it like a passing of the torch type of thing too, which is actually kind of like really cool, where you get like someone of the old garb to kind of be in a story with the new, I guess you could say the new hotness.
Yeah.
And like, but still pass on information that helps that character grow.
Yeah. Well, that's why having Mike McMahon, or I should say Mike McMahon, using and utilizing the Picard episode, Inner Light, I believe is the name of the episode that they were referencing. That's where Picard lives an entire life as another person, which we have talked about this, because from a philosophical standpoint, it's so powerful, because Picard is an individual that never had the opportunity to have a family. Now it's a little different. Let's forget Picard season 3 with his son and having this relationship with the Dr. Crusher now. But in general, it's always been agreed. In fact, that's the reason why Star Trek Picard season 2 was so powerful, because we all understood that this is a man that chose
to be alone
and Starfleet. That's his family. That's his life. That's his purpose. So he was never going to experience family life. He was never going to experience what it felt to have children, to be married, to have the intimacy of a family life. That's why Inner Light was so good.
Oh, yeah.
Because it gave him that. Because in all actuality, he does have a family. What's the difference between identity and experience?
Yes.
Isn't identity formed through experience?
Formed through experience.
And if you are experiencing what someone else is experiencing through their eyes, through their sensory, what's the word I'm looking for?
Through their perception.
Through their perception. There we go. Thank you, David. Through their perception, then is it not their experience as well?
Yeah.
Doesn't it also belong to them?
Exactly.
So that's why when you use an episode like this to pair with character development for Tendi, because even T'Lyn definitely learned something, but it was more about Tendi. She's the one that truly spent a year of trying to better herself and become a better person. In the end, yes, she became more knowledgeable, but it was more or less more about camaraderie and learning the important lesson of friendship and competition.
Yes. But like that's the thing though. Those things are still important to, I guess you could say that's more, those qualities are still important to human nature.
Yeah.
And like how you can actually,
there you go. Keyword human. When we're talking about Star Trek, it's always about human nature.
Always about
right?
human nature.
Yeah.
And like if you try to push something too much, then you go down into a path where you become less human. Like, or I guess you could say because you're losing your moral code or your human compass. Because that's what happened to Tendi. Toward the end, she started actually letting her insecurities ramp up and not realize that, oh, T'Lyn's been working with me this whole time and trying to help me. Meanwhile, I'm too into myself.
Yeah.
To actually realize that. And then like in the end, when it comes down to it, it's a simple message in the very end about friendship and camaraderie, but it's actually it's a very human story too, because like you don't realize, it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, but the best example I can tell how I kind of see that type of storyline is like when people watch It's a Wonderful Life. You see the grass is greener on the other side, but you fail to realize the grass on your side is just as green.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different.
Yeah. That's a good way of framing that.
And I'm glad you brought up the Picard episode, because that's one of my favorite episodes where you kind of get that vibe where it's like,
David, that episode's probably on the top 10.
Oh yeah, because like
top 10 Star Trek episodes of all time.
Because
easily.
It's one of those episodes that leaves a lot of Star Trek fans, I feel, very conflicted, because they're like going, are we supposed to see it tragically in the end?
Yeah, I think so.
Are we supposed to see it as glad? Because just like you said, Picard was able to actually experience this.
Yeah, it's tragic, but because he loses.
Yes.
He loses it, but he also has gained a memory of something that is very much his.
Yes, and it's his. And like he can enjoy that, even though he has to embrace the tragicness of the situation in the end.
Which, I mean, loss, when you're looking at humanist philosophy,
it goes into stoicism.
Right, because isn't loss kind of supposed to be accepted when it comes to the humanist philosophy to a degree, because it's human to die.
It's human to die.
It's human to experience loss.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a very strong episode. And I do appreciate that they were able to bring that back to Lower Decks and tie it in a meaningful yet comedic way. Because also, David, it also, through that entire aspect between Data, Tendi, and T'Lyn, they also expressed another very important Star Trek idea, and what happens when you don't actually adhere to this core principle, and this communication. Purple Data told Tendi, why don't you talk to T'Lyn?
Simple.
Why don't you speak to her? I think he said it several times.
Yeah,
why don't you just communicate with her? Well, isn't that the lesson at the center of pretty much all of Star Trek? Communication. Versus miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like that's such a powerful way. This is where Lower Decks really does shine. I do give it a lot of shit at times that it's too fun, they play fast and loose, but this is where it excels, because when you understand Star Trek and all its capacity and its different philosophical modes of introspection, like Mike McMahon does, in fact, know Star Trek, then you can take the most comedic of things and inject those aspects or those values into Star Trek, into your whatever it is that you're writing, and it's going to feel legitimate. It's always going to feel like Star Trek. That's why when people online, I was having a conversation with a few listeners about Section 31, the upcoming Section 31 film, and people are concerned about what it's really going to do because it doesn't look like Star Trek. And of course, we have marketing. We understand that marketing has a lot to play. They're trying to pull in a larger audience that surpasses just the everyday Star Trek fan. But also, anything can be Star Trek if you properly utilize humanist philosophy. If you embed it into your foundation, it will be Star Trek. The problem that occurs is when you don't use humanist philosophy in your Star Trek. So that's why Lower Decks continues to excel, despite some of my own personal preferences against the comedic.
Yes, because also like comedy and Star Trek can work, but it's always very awkward comedy, and it's only done sparingly throughout all of Star Trek history. Yes, we've had comedic moments. You know, Scotty hitting his head on the freaking hull of the ship as he's walking through the Enterprise. But to have a series that actually comedy is its central theme, it's the thematic element, we haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
And that's why partially for me, Lower Decks is special, because we're getting to see something that is different, is unique. But I am so happy that Mike McMahon and his writing team still carry on the tenets of Star Trek. It still feels like a Star Trek episode.
Yeah. Well, David, I think that does bring us to the end of our discussion on episode 7. But I will say, Dave, that Tendi is definitely my girlfriend. I mean, my toxic
I
trait.
thought you would say Talin.
No, Talin. Sorry, Talin, not Tendi. Talin. My toxic trait, Dave. My toxic trait, David, is falling for emotionally unavailable women. And that's Talin.
And that's Talin.
And I'm okay with that. All right, David, what is your RMD score and final thoughts?
My RMD score for this one, it's actually one of the better Lower Decks episodes this season, and I'm glad that we're seeing a ramp up, because I think it was the last episode or the episode prior where it was kind of took a dip because I felt they were kind of being stagnant. The humor was kind of getting starting to kind of be redundant, but in this one we get kind of like a classic feel Star Trek episode with the Lower Decks crew and with their comedic themes, and I thought that it was done very well. So my final score on it is I give this one an 88.
Okay. I'm right around you. I'm at 87%. I do feel like this is a step up from the rest of the season. Not that this season has been struggling, but surprisingly, this is not the best season.
No.
In fact, this might be, so far, we still have, 3 episodes left for the final season?
Yeah, I think 3.
So far, this is the weakest season. In my opinion, this is in fact the weakest season. There are some things that are missing.
It's hard to actually deny that, because like one of the biggest elements to me is like it feels there's no big myth arc.
Something is missing. I'm not quite sure what it is. It could be the myth arc, which is definitely a possibility. It doesn't feel like things are fully connecting together. It feels like there's a lot of loose strands just going amok and running in every which way.
And then the thing I'm worried about is like we're expected to, at the end, everything come together, and it's like that could get messy.
Well, fortunately, this is kind of low stakes. Also, if you really look at the story so far for Mariner, there isn't a lot of development of character, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Mike McMahon seems to be done with her. Like she got to a point of improvement, and how many more times can you revert her back to an immaturity level?
Yeah.
You can't. Otherwise, then what are you going to do at the last minute? You're going to fix it in season 5. So it feels like he's just biding his time. He's just, all right, let's get them. Let's move them along. Let's write our episodes. But we can't really do much with Mariner because it's going to actually set us back.
Exactly. Because, and I think I got that sense, especially in this episode, because like she spends a whole year trying to be a better person, which is different for Mariner, but it doesn't move the needle at all.
Yeah.
And then also with the other character that's kind of like the main with Mariner is Boimler. His entire progress is based on his beard. That's the thing that's so strange to me this season.
I mean, that's a way to put it for sure. I mean, you could say that it's the tablet, but
it's the beard. When you see his beard, okay, that's David, how far he's gone.
Right. No, you're right. Because it seems like in that writing room, Mike McMahon and his writers think it's the tablet. That tablet from the alternate reality is what's driving Boimler. But what is it actually driving him to do other than grow a beard?
I mean, like now.
Or spill, margaritas all over, or what was it? Chuladas? What were they called? I don't even remember the name of the drink now.
But like, when you look at it, he's right now in Mirror Universe version of beard. So, I mean, like next, I think the peak of his beardness is going to be, like Riker type of beard.
I did laugh when Rufus. Who's Rufus?
Rutherford.
I did laugh when Rutherford said, "Yeah, I'm getting a lot of compliments on my beard. I'm sure you are too." Well, Rutherford's beard looks OG. I mean, it looks like 80s Miami Vice, 5 o'clock shadow.
Yes. They're like almost like Crockett and Tubbs.
Yeah. And you have Boimler's that just looks like a kid trying to grow hair. Look, Dad. I have a beard like you.
Yeah, that's where he is right now. He's like he's that high schooler that has the scruffy goatee, and you're like going, really?
Yeah, that's my kid right now. He's trying to grow a little bit of scruff. I'm like, what is that?
What is that? You're not at your level yet.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back shortly with the next episode discussion.
Live long and prosper.